Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, welcome to the inaugural episode of Lost Reviews, tentatively titled. Oh, it'll probably be called that. This is a segment that I'll be doing occasionally, not with any kind of regularity, but whenever I feel the situation calls for it, where I will cover some games and expansions and reprints and things like that that I, for whatever reason, either didn't want to do a full review of, or couldn't for some reason. I didn't own a copy of the game, perhaps, or I got rid of my copy of the game, and so on and so forth. This is not a comprehensive review show. Rather, this is just me giving you my thoughts about the game because a lot of people ask me about it, want to know what I think, and I don't have any desire or ability to go back and do a full review. Now, by the very nature of it, just as a full disclaimer up front, I'm sure it's obvious, if I don't have a game, it's probably because I don't like it. So that could be considered a bit of a preemptive spoiler for a lot of the games that you see on the show, because either I got rid of it, which meant it wasn't good enough for me to keep, and which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, just not good enough for me to keep, or I never had it in the first place, I played someone else's copy, and I didn't have any desire to go and seek it out and get my own copy of it. So that can be a little bit of an anticlimactic thing. But it's not always going to be the case. So today, for example, we're going to look at a different version of an existing game that, I don't know, didn't feel necessary to do a full review of it because I wouldn't have much to talk about. But it's still worth talking a little bit about, and so it's going to go here. Same thing with the games that even that I don't like. You might say, well, like, why bother with it? If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. But and that is going to be the case sometimes. Sometimes a game is just so bad it's forgettable, which is like the worst thing, and I'm not even going to bother with it. But in some cases, a game is bad, in my opinion, of course, but it's still interesting to talk about and worth discussing as to why I didn't like it, at least in a very broad sense, because again, this is not going to be highly detailed. Well, that's enough rambling for now. Let's get to our first one for today. We will start with Innis. This is from Hanabi Games. Hanabi Games is one of my favorite publishers. A lot of people were saying this would be a spiritual successor to Kemet, which was their other big dudes on the map game before this. Really, it's not. They're very different both thematically and as far as the gameplay goes. Other than the fact that, yes, there are plastic figurines that go out on a map. But Innis is a game about you being, it's essentially Celtic myth, with some, I guess, bases in reality, where you're different Celtic clans trying to spread out and take control of territory. One of the characters is oh boy, I'm going to mess up the name of this. Is it the Den? Or the Ven? The Ben? The Men? The something? That is the leader of the clans at that particular time, or at least a spokespeople for the clans, and you'll be vying for that because it's sort of a tiebreaker thing and also gives you some control during the course of the game. But it's really just about putting out your dudes and also putting out citadels and temples, which can matter as well. And the most interesting thing about the game is the fact that you have, there's different goals that you need to meet during the game that can be considered end game goals. Have control of a certain amount of territories, like have your people far and wide across the map. Or have control of a lot of territories that have temples, or have control of a lot of territories that have citadels. And there's these different goals that you want to meet during the course of the game, and then by doing so, you take a token saying, "Aha! I am eligible for victory." And the more of those you have, the more eligible you are. And if you have the most eligibility for victory at the end of any turn, you just win the game. Now, theoretically, that can happen very early. Chances are it's not going to happen very early, and it'll go on for quite a bit because people are vying back and forth to make sure that one person doesn't dominate so quickly, so fast, at least if you're playing the game right, whatever that is. Now, in theory, this is the kind of game I would adore because it's Hanabi, it looks beautiful. I wasn't a total fan of the artwork and presentation at the outset from what I saw ahead of time. Once I actually sat down and played the game, it grew on me. I liked the art style on the cards, and I liked the simplicity and yet at the same time high quality of the components that you actually play the game with. It doesn't take a lot to set up the game and get it going. I like that simplicity too. And there are interesting mechanisms in the game, but here's the thing. Innis felt to me like a collection of interesting mechanisms that never gelled together into a cohesive, fun narrative for me. What I mean by that is just, it never gelled together into a game that I would want to play over and over again, because ultimately just felt like it was a patchwork thing. Like, okay, we do a draft. We're drafting these cards that we're going to use as our action cards. But ultimately what you're trying to do is the dudes on the map section. And unlike other games where you're doing a draft that influences a board, it never felt connected in a very real way to me, because a lot of the action cards that you draft aren't particularly interesting. Like, I move a guy here. I swap these two guys. I cancel out your card. And there aren't a lot of drafting cards. That's a big knock against the game, in my opinion. Like, right out of the box, I felt like you needed an expansion that gave you more action cards to draft. I'm just talking about the basic action cards. But another problem with the game are, I think they're called Legends or Tales and Legends cards, which are cards that by doing certain actions, you can, or taking over certain territories, you can get those cards, which are extra additional things that you can do in the game, which didn't really do much either. A couple of them were pretty powerful. Some of them just did the same generic stuff that your basic action cards did. But they have beautiful artwork, for what that's worth. So I never felt like I was doing anything major with the draft out on the actual board. Combat is extremely anticlimactic. It's just like, okay, I decide, and it's very weird how it's explained too. Like, I decide to have an attack, and then we go through, and people have to take off troops representing combat, I guess. And this is something we're going to talk about in the next game I'm going to talk about as well, where the designers clearly said, we don't want random dice chucking Ameritrash in this game, so let's just get the combat out of the way very quickly and move on. We just get it out of the way. That's just all you got to do. But by doing that, it made the combat, which I think should be the most interesting part of the game, super boring and dull and not really anything. And hiding in citadels, like, I can't wait to hide. So it looks great. It is an interesting series of concepts. The idea, by the way, of the goals is probably the most interesting part of the game. And it just drags it out. It's like, yeah, I mean, because you're constantly like, okay, wait, stop. We got to count. Okay, you don't get one of the things this time, so you're not eligible for anything. Okay, count. Oh, wait, if I did this, and it just led to a lot of analysis paralysis and people being like, oh, do I do this? But whereas there's no clearly defined thing to move towards. I don't think it's a terrible game. It is interesting, but ultimately it was a big letdown. Even though I don't think this is the spiritual successor to any other game from Madagot, it is a successor in terms of every other game, or many of the other games I've played from them have been very, very good. This one was a bigger letdown for me because of that. That's Innis from Madagot. I have less to say about our next game because I really hated this game. It is Cry Havoc from Portal Games. Now, one of the things about that is interesting, not about the game itself, there's nothing interesting about the game itself, but what is interesting is that I am in the minority, I believe, of not just reviewers, but gamers in general who seem to adore this game. So much so that they've already announced an expansion, and it's not even, well, I mean, I would expect an expansion some months, but feels like it's only been a few months since it's been widely available, and they've already said like, we got this big thing coming out. And I hate this game. In fact, I played it with two groups of people, and nobody liked it at all. Varying degrees. Like, I played with some people who were like, well, I can understand what they were going for here, but it didn't really get me. Me and a few other people were like, oh god, get this away from me. In concept, it looks great. Science fiction, again, dudes on the map, trying to take control of different territories. It's got this cool sci-fi feel. The miniatures are kind of weird looking, but I like that. It wasn't that bad for me. It's a very good looking game. And different factions with different sort of ways to go out winning the game, different card decks that you draw for that can influence where you are on the map and what you can do. All of these things are fine, if not necessarily all that innovative, but there's a few problems. Number one, the balance was all over the place. And I know I hate saying that because then someone will say in the comments, now Nick, I've played this game 20 times, and let me tell you, there's no difference, there's no disparity between the different factions. But in both of the games that I played, there was one faction, I don't even remember the name of them, who ran away with the game because they were getting free territories on the board for like doing nothing. Okay, fine. There's lots of games I play that you could say are not balanced. They're still good games. What killed this for me, even more so than it did in Innis, is how the combat worked. I hated the combat system in this game. You take your little miniatures of your little dudes, or the monsters that you have to fight out on the planet. super generic science fiction theme, put them on this little board, and then you go through these different little areas of like, defensive or offensive, and I'm killing your guys, not in this area. It's weird, it's clunky, it's anticlimactic, and again, just like with Innis, it's the developer saying, look, the people that we want this game that's a science fiction game to appeal to Eurogamers and heavy strategic thinking gamers, so to speak, and we can't have dice. Dice are terrible. Dice are a terrible thing. We don't want random cards. We don't want tokens. We don't want anything exciting or random. Let's just have them take your miniatures off and put them on this other little board. And I hated it. And again, maybe that wouldn't have been so overwhelmingly negative for the game if anything else in the game was interesting. Everything else is just very bland, by the numbers, dudes in the map, area control, not even nearly as interesting as Innis. So whereas I can see some good things in Innis, and I would maybe play that again, I hope I never come into contact with Havoc. And again, just like with Innis, it's coming from a company who has a great track record. I love Portal games. Portal games are some of the best games that I've ever played. They're in my top 100. Not this one. And the last game we're going to really briefly talk about is Hanabi Deluxe. Now, here's the thing. I've already done a full review, sort of Hanabi Deluxe. This version. This is the American version, or North American version, from R&R Games. This is the, I would say, original European Deluxe version from Abacusspiele. And as you can tell, first off, right off the bat, they come in very different boxes. I will confess, I don't buy new editions of every game that I enjoy. But even though that one's got a cool magnetic latch, the cool wooden box feel of this one did sort of draw me in. I don't typically fall for crap like that, but I liked this one. And I already knew I loved Hanabi, so I wanted to check this one out too. And there's a couple of other improvements as well as a couple of other sort of bad things. So improvements. Well, first off, I don't know how much to blame R&R Games for, but their version of the deluxe game stinks. When you open the box, it smells to high heaven of acetone, whatever they use on the tiles. Now, when I acknowledged that in my original review, the publisher actually contacted me to their credit and said, first print run had this problem, we're going to send you a new one. Sorry about that. Please let people know that not every copy of the game is like that. I was like, okay, that's totally fine. I understand. Thank you for that. They sent me the new copy. It still stank, just not as much. No such problem with the Abacusspiele Deluxe version. At least, no, not that I can tell at all. There's no stink to it. They come in another little cardboard box that goes inside the box. The bigger plus, though, really significant one, I don't care about the smell that much. It's not like you notice the smell when you're actually playing the game, just when you open it up. But what is significant is that the tiles from... by the way, if you're not familiar with the Hanabi Deluxe Edition, it uses tiles as opposed to cards. The tiles from the Abacusspiele version are engraved, the little fireworks symbols, and they are still colorblind friendly because they're different symbols. Whereas the ones from the R&R version are printed on, which means over time, as you're shuffling them, quote unquote, around on the table, it could theoretically wear off. So I really appreciate the engraving. What I don't like so much about these is that they're not significantly, well, I don't know, depending, but I don't know if you could tell. This is the Abacusspiele. This is the R&R one from the original version I had. Pretty small. These fall over a lot easier if you're not careful. That's a bit of a problem. Also, the artwork. There's nothing on the back of these, which I can understand because you're engraving, you want to save the cost. But I wish the engravings on the Abacusspiele version were bigger. As you can tell, while it sucks that they're imprinted, the image is a lot bigger and easier to see, especially with the colors for people who aren't focusing on the symbols because they're not colorblind. It would be better to have the symbols bigger on the Abacusspiele version. But another huge benefit in the Abacusspiele version is plastic clue tokens. And the lightning strike tokens, or explosion tokens to signify you're going to die. Nice, also engraved. They look good. They're weighty and significant, whereas I didn't pull them out, but the ones from R&R are tiny little cardboard chits, and I hate them. It never affected my playing of the game, but it's much better for this one. So, which one do you get? Get the one that's easier to get, the R&R version. It's not that significantly different, but if you have the opportunity to get the Abacusspiele version, I think it's slightly better. Still a great game. I love Hanabi. Check it out no matter how you can. That's been Lost Reviews. Thank you for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon, and make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your